Now, the people who don't care about truth or have a love for truth, they really do in their minds and hearts. Now notice what deception is. Now, if they're really blind, you're going to just say liberty, go out and sin all you want, but they really truly have that understanding. Like Moses's writings all went away, and this is the liberty. This is the liberty Paul's speaking of, that you can do whatever you want. What does Paul say? If you were bought with a price, don't you know that you become a slave, a servant to the one that bought you? So there's a certain way you're supposed to live now. There's so many different ways that, he was saying the same things. He never said go out and break these things, but this is where the rightly dividing comes in now. For people that don't care about truth, they don't learn these things ever in their life, They really think grace and something new, faith is something new. God never, the Father never worked by faith before, through faith, his righteousness. No, this is something new, so you could do away with everything and just kind of create your own laws and your own rules. All those writings they meant nothing, you do whatever you want. That's the liberty we're free from. And as I'm understanding these things more in more depth, what liberty you're free from, understanding how the Hebrews had to do things. You first have to understand that to understand what liberty he's talking about. And Paul went around, his work was mostly, first a little bit of Jerusalem for a short time, and then he went to the Gentiles, those who were not blood Hebrews. And that was his ministry, see, preaching the risen Messiah. And the Hebrews had the Messiah in the flesh. And he was only for the lost sheep of Israel while he was in the flesh, see. In the flesh, that was his only purpose, to bring back the lost sheep of Israel to the true way of keeping all these laws and writings during the Old Covenant. At no point, so you understand some of this, what this liberty means. At no point was the Messiah going to teach them to break the Torah according to in the flesh, the natural Jerusalem, earthly, from the earth. At no point were they going to be taught to break that. But you can, because he said, my words are spirit, the flesh profits nothing. We know all his words in spirit now, okay? That those words spiritually are still the same. We don't go around teaching people to break God's laws, not even the least of them. But him in the flesh, he did not teach to break any of these things in the flesh, They still had to complete it and do these things, and that's how he brought them back to keeping the true way, bringing it back to the true way of completing Moses's writings, bringing back the sheep, the flesh, natural Israel. In the flesh, he served, and he did those things. He didn't break these shadows and types of the spiritual thing that was already starting to be revealed. And that's why Paul went to the Gentiles. And Gentiles never had law, see? But anyone today has to understand those natural things and complete them spiritually. They're not lawless, okay? When being one under Christ means understanding those things and fulfilling them spiritually. And an unbeliever today is a Gentile, and they don't have this, but an unbeliever today has to understand what the laws are so that they're also one, just as a Hebrew, no different today. No difference once the old covenant passed away. But a Gentile before, wasn't under law, but they had to understand the risen Christ and what these things mean spiritually. So an unbeliever, a Gentile, also has to understand it in the same way. But the Hebrews were still, I'm making this point so it's clear, they were still under the old covenant. It wasn't passed away until heaven and earth passed away, the old covenant. And I believe that, during this new heavens and earth and new covenant, this also too will pass away and be changed for the real thing. It's multi-layered, his truth, and this is why you have to seek truth, because you'll never see these things if you don't. The old covenant, old heavens and earth passed away. The natural passed away, but nothing of God's word disappeared. And they kept these Sabbath days and all these things, and don't touch this and don't touch, They weren't going to be taught to break them. As long as the old covenant stood, they could not fully go into the real thing, the new covenant. This is what I've been shown. The Jews, the Hebrews, while the old covenant stood, as long as it stood, and now they were fulfilling it, and Christ was bringing them back, the lost sheep of Israel. In the flesh, he was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. How to fulfill it the true way, bring them back. They weren't going to be taught to break any of the law or any least little writing, And so like I said, I'm learning more of these things, but some of the easier ones to understand, like the Sabbath day, they weren't going to be taught to just break it. But they still had to do these things like Christ did, the real way, the true way, a true Israelite, how a true Israelite would fulfill it, bring them back. And as long as the temple stood, like I said, I'm repeating, because they weren't going to be taught to break it the natural way as long as the natural way stood. So in a way, the heavens and earth passed away. But did the law pass away? No, the natural part of the law passed away once it was fulfilled fully. Once the old covenant was removed, the only thing standing, like we read in Hebrews, what was shaking, anything that could be shaken is removed. We have like a physical earthquake and judgments, and it was removed, but it also represents the removing of the old and transforming into the new for the Hebrews. So in like manner, the new heavens and earth today are the new covenant, but it became spiritual. And this also will be removed, I believe, fully. The flat, our bodies will be changed in some way that was changed and became the new covenant. And these heavens and earth will pass away, like we read in scriptures, to be changed, like I read in Psalm a while back on my videos. They grow old like a garment. They shall be changed, the heavens and earth. So this old covenant to new covenant was part of this change, but then we still have another change for the new covenant. It will be the full thing, the real thing, glorified, and the new heavens and earth, everything changed for the real thing. See, it's like a type of that real thing that finally comes, is to come. So the heavens and earth did pass away, in a sense that the old covenant passed away. And the law and every jot and tittle, every writing passed away in the sense that it became spiritual. That's what passed away when it was fulfilled. And when the old would be removed, that's what they were looking forward to, a new heavens and a new earth where righteousness dwell. This was a better covenant for, the Hebrews, any blood Jew, but the Gentiles they were never under the law, and they weren't going to be told to go back to the shadow things, because they're already supposed to be fulfilling spiritual things. They weren't going to be told to do the shadow things, and the Hebrews weren't going to be told to break the law according to the natural way, the old covenant. So for a time there was old wine and new wineskin, mixing. This is the understanding I've been given. This is where a lot of confusion, that people don't care about truth. They think it's, oh, for the Jews only to keep the commandments. No. But they were still, if you want to call it, under that heavy burden, if you will, that in that they had to keep all these shadow things, right? Fulfill it like the Messiah did in the flesh, the true way. He didn't eat pork and, all these other details. He fulfilled that perfectly. But the Gentiles weren't going to be commanded to do the natural thing when that thing represented something spiritual, new heavens, new earth, the kingdom of heaven, and not the kingdom of the earth. They weren't going to be commanded to go back into that, into the natural way. And this is a little bit hard to explain, because I see it in my mind, but I'm trying to put it into words. It was true. There's no Jew, there's no Gentile, all are one. But for a time, there was still this mixing of the old and new. And once Jerusalem was taken out, natural Jerusalem, the old covenant, the only thing that stands is the new covenant, the new heavens and earth, because those are heavenly things and they cannot be shaken. So that was shaken and removed. But now during the new covenant, I believe we have an application of the actual heavens and earth someday being shaken, the new covenant, and it's also going to change and become the real thing. It's deep. It's multi-layered. That's what I'm trying to say. There's not just one meaning to prophecy. You know what I'm saying? It has like multi-layered meaning. So I'm not saying that's the only understanding. I believe at the end of this new covenant age, there will be judgment and wrath, and these things will be changed eventually for the real thing, the real new heavens and earth, because we have that in part now. See, we're spiritual. We moved away from that old covenant natural understanding, but then this also has to be changed for the true change. Glorified bodies, new heavens and earth, all of that needs to be changed for the real thing that those old things always represented and pointed to. But we're still in the flesh, and we're going from 6 to 7, from natural man made on day 6 to 7 spiritual, but we don't have the full thing, and 8 represents the full thing, the judgment, and after this, the new creation. So we are in the new creation, new heavens and earth, but there's a fulfillment of this, something better. Like this was better than the old covenant, there's something coming that's better than this new covenant. See, the real thing of what those shadow things always pointed to is still coming, but we're in them already. People that don't rightly divide, they say only one of these things are true, like preterists, and they say all of that is already in fulfillment. It's going to go on like this forever. And like I read, they take some away from the faith. It breaks them. It really does. You can't have doctrine like that. It's damaging doctrine. You're going to be full of leaven, and it's going to continue to rise in you until you don't have any truth left in you. Like some saying the resurrection past, it's a damaging doctrine. It's going to lead to other false things, and you're going to go in and search other false things. It's just the way it is. It's the way God made it. You have to have true doctrine. So preterism says the resurrection happened already, not rightly dividing. They don't understand what it means the kingdom came, and why it was so important, such a big deal to look forward to, is because there wouldn't be a heavy burden anymore to do all these physical things, but we complete all of that spiritually. And that's the understanding I'm continuing to learn, what these things mean spiritually. I think that's part of being in Christ, is learning all those shadow things, and you grow and learn them, and you know what they mean spiritually, and you complete them. That's the whole purpose. It's the whole purpose. But they take that away. They take that understanding away. Once you understand that everything that happened in the old covenant as a type, the last days, the judgment on Jerusalem, the wrath, and it was taken away because they didn't believe in the Messiah. There was a judgment. These are a type of something that's coming in the end days of the new covenant, and it's going to wax worse in the same manner that it did back then. But now the new heavens and earth, the new covenant is making way for the real thing. Just like the old covenant, is being done away with, shadow things, not that the law was done away with. And it was being shaken and judged, Jerusalem, in a location. And all those things were shaken and done away for the new covenant to stand and remain and be the only true thing. So in like manner, the new covenant will also, the heavens and earth, probably literally, man. I mean, because this creation needs to be changed. The new covenant, the new heavens and earth, this new heavens and earth, not that that's going to go away, not that the kingdom goes away, but this is also all going to be shaken on this final judgment, and it's going to have to be changed eventually, but not before the 1,000 years, I believe. Not before the 1,000 years is my understanding. Not before that reigning and the kingdoms of this world becoming the kingdoms of God. Then afterwards, it doesn't say much. And it's like that for a reason, because we really don't. It's not beneficial to go beyond what's written. It's what I read. It's not beneficial to start making things up on how it's going to be, because it's not really written. We just have to accept we don't know fully. That's why we see through a glass darkly. Preterism says we see through a glass fully because they already believe Christ came back in the full, glorified. He already came back. They don't understand that the old covenant went away and he came in his kingdom, and the only thing that stands is the new heavens and earth, his kingdom. And now, like the parable says, there was a delay. He goes away for a while, like Moses went away to the mountain. And he's building New Jerusalem, and we're understanding and growing and learning these spiritual things and not doing away with the law. And then at the end, it'll be very much like it was at Jerusalem's end, the old covenant. New covenant and age abiding. That's how we know these things don't mean everlasting, because the old covenant was everlasting and it was replaced by a new covenant. We don't want to go back to the shadow things and start enforcing people to keep a physical, literal Sabbath day and don't touch this, don't touch that. Not that we're promoting sin, but we understand we don't go back to the shadow. I think that's a lot of what Paul was trying to get the understanding. Didn't go away, but we're not enforcing people to go back to the shadow. This was the heavy thing, burden, all these physical things they had to do in the flesh that represented something spiritual. We're resting in him when we have faith, just as the fathers rested from all this time after the seventh day. It always represented this new thing. He's resting from his works ever since then. But first he worked 6 days, then rested. And first the earthly kingdom, the first thing, natural, they worked physically 6 days. Then they rested physically, literally, couldn't do anything, But now we're doing what the Father is doing, in the sense that we're resting. And what that represented all this time is resting from our works, not counting on our own works to be righteous, but on him. And that's how we fulfill this rest, Sabbath day. And I believe in like manner, the feast days all represented something like this too, as I'm learning what these things mean. But I know we don't go back to the shadow and natural understanding of these things. They didn't go away, but we're completing them spiritually. This is the light burden, easy yoke. That's what I'm understanding. That's how you live by every word, because we understand that every word is spiritual. God inspired the word through the prophet. The Father is spirit, so his words always had a spiritual meaning. They're not just carnal words. If it was inspired through the prophets, then, his word is spirit. If it was inspired through the Messiah, he spoke the Father's words, and he said, my word is spirit. That's the Father inspiring those words. He said, these aren't truly my words. These are the Father's words. Don't you know we are one? It's the saint today should be able to understand and say the same things. Father's in me. I'm in the Father, but like he abided in the Father to do the works. His words coming out of his mouth, the Father's word, spirit in him. We also abide in the vine. And if we abide in the vine like he did to the Father, that first fruit, the example, then we also have the Father. It has nothing to do with Trinity and these three gods are one. It's something way deeper, has way more value, and they take that and strip it away by just saying, oh, this speaks of the Trinity. No, this is some great thing, to be one. I'm not denying that there's something about the number three, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I'm not denying that. There is something to the number three, the perfect thing. But it has nothing to do with these two are gods, separate persons, beings, and these are the one God, and these three are all one. That does away with any spiritual understanding. That's how you know it's false. It's very carnal. This is the golden calf they built. I'm convinced, that is the golden calf of the New Covenant age. And there's more, there's more than one golden calf, but this is like the main one. I see it as the Trinity. These people are yet carnal. So you could see, once you start understanding his truth, it's actually it's simple, but it's deep. So it's like, try imagining telling a new believer, you're spreading the gospel, all these things. It's gonna be way beyond what they can comprehend. They have to also grow and start learning these things. We know you can't just put it on someone all at once. And that's my understanding of, they didn't put this all on the Gentiles at once, command them not to eat things of blood and, some of the big obvious nasty things, but we're not going to put too much on them now because we have the same spiritual understanding they did. It would be crazy. It would be too much. And that's why I'm convinced the Messiah said, I have many things to tell you, his disciples. And this applies to us. He has a lot to say to us in the beginning when we first believe. But they were still carnal in the flesh, see? But you cannot bear them right now. See how true those words are once you become spiritual. I have many things to say to you. Many. Oh yeah, you can't just do whatever but you can't bear them now. But when the Spirit of truth comes, he'll lead you and guide you into all truth. And even when you have the Spirit, you can't bear it all at once. He gives you. You grow. Scripture proves this. It backs it up that you cannot just become a tree overnight. Just like the physical natural creation, a giant tree, that seed of that tree cannot become a giant tree in one day. No, it can't. But this doesn't mean that we're going out of our way to sin. We're still a little bit blinded in things and we're repenting and growing of it. That's what it means to be in grace. Those who are in grace, they're in a different level than somebody else, that might be in the same grace, It's this chastising, continual judgment and growing. That's how you know you're in grace. You know more and understand more now than you did a year ago. And that year you understood more than you did the previous year. And this got to keep growing. But people who are not in this, they do not grow. They stay the same the rest of their life. They're not coming to any knowledge of Christ, of truth. They're ever learning and never coming to knowledge of truth. And we know that a carnal man cannot study the Bible, the scriptures, and just know these things just with their carnal mind. We know that. So that's why we admonish once or twice. And then if they resist it, like the people in Israel resisted Moses, after that you got to back off, because now you're going against the Father's will. Not that you can actually do that, but you know what I mean. You have to back off, because Paul understood this spiritually, that he just plants a seed and waters, and then a lot of times you'll never see these people again, and you might have done some great work that God did through you, and he caused it to grow, but you might probably not see a lot of the work you do. Most likely won't see it all, most of it. So it's, and we read that, the breadth, the length, the depth, the width of God's knowledge and how he created all these things with meaning. It's deeper than even what I understand this moment. I know that because I know there's no such thing as becoming a tree overnight. It's deep, his prophecies, his word, his truth. It has a lot of spiritual meaning. And that's why it says, you can have all knowledge. And he says, seek these things. seek them. They're good. Prophecy, spiritual gifts, certain things, seek them, but you also understand that it's without love, without understanding these spiritual things and sin, that it's nothing. You're just a bell just making noise or something, And because that's written, there are a few out there that are only about knowledge. And now the way I believe you can see them with your spiritual eyes, okay, is that they will go out of their way most of the time, I think, to never really mention sin or give anything about it. It's just knowledge, just doctrine. They stay away from sin. Right? That's what I understand. The people who only care about knowledge, they look like a disciple, but that's all they care about is just the knowledge. And they were given this knowledge, and this is what's deceiving. God gives knowledge to people who are false. He does do that. And he also gives the ability for people to, healings, many great works. These didn't go away. It's just that most people don't believe. That's what I know and I'm convinced of. Many will say, Lord, Lord, look at all the great works, mighty works we did, We healed, we did this in your name, we prophesied in your name. And they might even prophesy true things. That's what's deceptive, but they never knew him. And what that means is they never had a concern or care really for overcoming sin. It all comes back to that, for keeping his commandments. They never really did that or kept that or cared about it in their heart. That's why it's so deceiving. That's why all those words are true. Many false prophets will go out and deceive many. Those are not light words. It's happening all the time, especially now that I believe we're coming up to the end. It's way worse now. It's getting worse, this deception, than it was like 1,000 years ago. It was deceived then too, but it's worse. It gets worse and worse as the end comes. And I don't know, like in my other videos, what the end is, but I feel just seeing the world and understanding it, and the harlot and understanding it, it's getting close. The whole world's filled up with people, fill the earth and multiply. There's a church building a temple in almost every corner of the world. The leaven has grown almost to ripeness, and that's the judgment when the angel gets the sickle out and reaps, There's going to be a judgment. And I feel like it's getting close. Like I said, I don't see it as like 40 or 50 years out, but I can't tell you that with certainty, but I feel like it's well within that range, like 10, I don't know, 15, 8 years. I don't know for sure, but it's not far. I'm pretty sure it's not far. The whole world really is Sodom and Gomorrah, but the Christians don't see it as Sodom and Gomorrah because they don't care about his spiritual law. They think the world is good. And some of them might even say it's getting better, like preterists. That's one of the damnable things about preterism. John Preston, they teach, that man who gathers disciples unto himself, teaches that the world is getting better and better. I studied it. I watched many of his videos in the past. I learned through it. Didn't have the proper rightly dividing and discernment, but what I did know was that something's off. I'm missing something. And this is what it means to be humble and, throw your hands up and say, I don't know. I don't know truth. Show me the truth. So I acknowledged, and I didn't like that I didn't fully see it. I didn't like it, but I had to have patience and say, I don't know. Show me. What does this end time types and Christ coming and all these things, what do they mean? I'm missing something. I know I'm missing something. And I was missing something. That Jerusalem was a type of how it would be at the end of the New Covenant age. They deny that Christ is coming back in glory. They deny it. They say it already happened. He came in his kingdom to establish it. And that kingdom will never die or be destroyed. But this kingdom will continue to grow until God is all in all. But it has nothing to do with evil and this earth continuing as it is. The kingdom never dies. It never goes away, but it doesn't. They deny a lot of scripture. They deny the whole restoration of all. They deny the kingdoms of this world becoming the kingdoms of God. They deny that God is merciful and favors mercy over judgment. So they put judgment, and then they give you a false meaning of judgment and say this is torture for all eternity. But not only that, they say judgment stands on top of mercy forever. No, that's breaking his word. He favors mercy over judgment. At the end, mercy will have been on top. It will be at the top. He will be found a merciful Father for all. That will be what stands at the top. And we read he wants mercy over sacrifice, and we have to understand these things spiritually. He wants you to live it spiritually and be merciful like him spiritually over sacrifices constantly, These are some, it's like the more I understand, the more I could see others don't understand. So it really is Sodom and Gomorrah, this world. And people don't want to hear that. They don't like that. Christians don't like it. I've said some things, how this world is evil and it's sick, and it's corrupt. And they don't like it. They love this world. People I know, I tried to give them a little bit, and I discern it. I see it right away that there's like they tense up, you could see it. They can't even hide it physically. They think they're hiding in the dark, but I even see it outwardly, let alone my spirit is discerning their spirit. I see it outwardly. They can't even control it. They hate God's word, and then they go to church every day pretending they love it. They hate that you would say that all of the church world is in sin, and this whole world is in sin, because they're still one with it. You're destroying who and what they are. If the harlot is one with the beast, by saying that the beast is evil is also saying that they are evil, even though that's not your intentions to go around condemning. You're giving truth, you're correcting. That's what we're supposed to do with love, proper intentions. It's all about the heart. But they think that you're speaking evil of them, and that is your intention. So they get mad at you, and then they say, who are you, God? I've experienced this real life. I'm not just making it up. I've been told that. Who do you think you are, God? And then I stand back in total wonder. Like, I have nothing to do with thinking I'm God. I just want you to know the truth. But they think you're God, and you're like the God of condemners, Carnal man hates spiritual man, because the carnal man is the spirit of Antichrist, and that spirit hates the spirit of God. Naturally. Like we all did. Like when we were carnal, we would have hated a spiritual man coming up to us and speaking truth, true words. True words burn people. That's why I lost another subscriber, and it's continuing to go down. 8 in a month, I think. Good. I pray for it, and God is answering my prayers. I seek truth, and he gives and continues to give and answer. They don't believe that, though. They never ask him anything. They start studying and looking on the internet and studying their own, asking their ministers. They never rely on the Father for truth, when that's the promise. You will be led into all truth. Not right away. You have to have patience. It's part of the growing. He'll force you, cause you to have patience if you're overcoming. You don't get it right away. Just like, not that God is a man, the Father's a man, but he has patience because he wants something that doesn't happen right away. It's an example of him having patience, long suffering. He wants all creation to be created in his image. We understand that they will be someday, but he doesn't get it right away. And he was the example first, before we were, of long suffering, patience towards the wicked, not even giving them what they truly deserve, but less than what they deserve. That's what everyone will find out, that everyone got less than what they deserve. A lot of patience, to the point where we read scriptures where it appears like it's that carnal man that wants to be jealous of the wicked. They prosper. We read a lot of scriptures about that. And that's the back and forth I went in one of my videos. Like, are they getting judged? Does he have, what's going on? Is this righteous? They're prospering, they have money, they're all the women and all the things we're not supposed to want. That's why we're not supposed to be jealous of it. And we understand not only do they not have life in this life, which is righteous judgment, they're not spiritual alive, they don't have that hope or faith or anything. Okay, they go day by day focusing on the worldly things, and they think that gives them life. They think more money is going to give them life, and everyone thinks that winning the lottery will give them more life, when I think in fact we know most of them go totally insane. The very few that do win something, they go insane, because once they find out it didn't do anything for them, it's a very deep spiritual destruction once they find that money couldn't have bought them happiness or joy, not happiness. Once they see that and experience that, then they have nothing left, man. They're dead, lost. And that's his righteous judgment. So why would you be jealous of that? They don't have life. People that go into the temple buildings and are breaking his commands spiritually, he's not mocked. This is how you start seeing his judgments, how righteous they are. They don't have life. No matter how much they smile or jump up and down, they're spiritually dead and struggling within. They're not going to show it, because I know how I was when I was carnal. You pretend, you smile, you do what you can to hide the beast. But I was dead. I was dead. So sometimes when you think you're maybe not doing so good, it could be sin, so don't get that wrong. It could be something that you need corrected in. But you don't forget how dead you were. You're probably already starting to forget how dead you were. You're just getting used to this life. You're more alive than you think. If you're believing, okay, if you are believing and overcoming and doing, you're more alive than you think. And God, he proved that to me. He proved that to me. I fell, a righteous man falls 7 times. I didn't go into any crazy big sins, but I just sort of fell, a while back. Just sort of lost that faith, and just started relying on some of the worldly entertainments and stuff like this, and just he brought me back into darkness, and that darkness was great. That darkness was great. And then, by his mercy, he brought me back, slapped me, what on earth was I doing? And now I have proper fear for his judgments. I think every saint will go through that. He sort of lets you go and then brings you back, show you how good it is that, to have the Father. That's all that's good. This world is nothing. It's just death. I experienced that. That's why I could talk like that. Anxiety, worries, doubts, fears. It started all creeping back, and then one day literally just melted away. It's just life, and wanting to seek more truth and do more that's good and right. Stay away from the flesh. So he brings you back. He bring me back into darkness that I was having to manage with every day before that grace. But it seemed like it was a lot darker than before that grace, because I think what's happening there is you were in that darkness, but once you have the light, then you go back into that darkness. It seems way greater than it was. I think that's what's really happening. It could be deceiving, So, and there's, if you don't live in the flesh, then you'll continue to have this life. Paul talks like this all the time. If you live in the flesh, then you start dying. It's true words spiritually. So if you're lacking something, if you're in some kind of death, something needs corrected. You have to seek out what this is and repent and correct. Because our promise is not to be continually dead if we have belief. If you believe in him, you will never die. And I don't believe our faith is totally perfect along that path. We have these little pitfalls and die a little, and he brings us back, It's part of the process of a righteous man falling 7 times, which is the whole thing, the complete thing. Like his whole creation was the complete thing, 7th day. That number 7 represents the whole entire process of life, of falling and growing more, falling and growing more. slip a little bit and he chastises you, and maybe this time the chastising is bigger for that same thing than it was before, because you need to be perfected. So he sends the whip out spiritually. That's what he does to his sons. We fulfill those writings spiritually. Moses is writing spiritually. Don't place heavy burdens on people. We just understand that it's spiritual and that we are completing these things if we believe in him. He guides us to get to the Father, to keep his commandments, which are way up here, up high. He guides us to do that, just like Moses guided them to keep all those shadow things, laws. This is what sin is. They guided him, the mediator, to the Father to fulfill those 10 commandments. You can't touch those 10 commandments unless you're going through the fire now and learning how to do that in the desert. You can't touch his 10 commandments unless you're going through that mediator, Christ, through that desert, and we're working our way to the promised land. It's what it is. Most don't make it. Most get dried up and die. The testing is in their, they falsely believe that these are heavy burdens. This is too hard, like that parable. You're a hard man and you don't reap where you sow. So he gives him back the same understanding that since you knew I was hard and I don't reap what you sow, you should have at least done this, and this, and give that sum of money to the bankers for interest, since you knew I was so hard. He gives it back on him, and this is what judgment's going to be like, I think, on that day. Whatever you thought, you're going to get that back to you because you believed that and thought that. And even in this life, too. It's not as if his judgments aren't in the world right now. They are. But just the fullness of it's not revealed yet. The fullness of life is not revealed. The fullness of this spiritual death and judgment isn't revealed. They'll know the true fullness of being wretched, miserable, blind, poor, naked, just like we'll know, and we have this in part already, what it is to fully be in life. See how both of those are true? Both of those are true, not just the life part. We'll know what it really is to have life fully. They'll really know what it is, and they'll see it to be in spiritual death. And I fear those judgments, man. I can't imagine myself being fully spiritually dead. It's proper fear. It's proper teaching. To fear his judgments. It's the beginning of wisdom and knowledge. And they don't have fear in their eyes, I'm telling you. The average Christian, they don't have any fear in their eyes. They live as if it's like, how should I say it? It's easy. It's an easy path. They just do whatever you want, and there's no like, oh wait, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. If I hear his voice, I can't do this. Then you're going to be hated for not doing whatever this is. And he's separating you and judging you, and you're suffering properly. But they're not suffering for his name. But they will, see? They will. Everyone will suffer for his name's sake. There's no escaping that, no mocking him. I don't even remember what the title of this video is, but I'm just speaking as whatever he gives me to speak. And he does that. He will do that for you. He said to his disciples, especially if you're in trouble, don't worry, I'll give you words to speak. What to say at the right time, when trouble comes or whatever situation, he'll give you words. That's still true. That applies to us. Every single word applies to us. All his words were spirit, but we have to have the proper discernment of those natural things. The natural faded away. This is the true liberty. That's what it was, liberty, I think. You don't have liberty to sin. It's definitely not what it's talking about, but you're being liberty, free from, all these like physical shadow commands. It's a lot to do, physically. It's my understanding. It's that liberty of that shadow understanding of what the law is, because now it's in our hearts. So, it's not some kind of heavy burden. And the flesh profits nothing. So if you tell someone to keep the Sabbath day, literally according to the shadow, what's really starting to go on in that person's heart is they think they're better than others because they do some physical thing that has no spiritual benefit. That's my understanding of that. You're doing some physical thing. And this is what no, it's not what that means. It's not what it's about. And same for the food, I'm convinced of that too. I'm not telling people to eat junk, if you don't want to eat these things that he says not to eat, but that all by itself, understanding this one thing, food, it does not make you spiritual just because I don't eat pork and you do, therefore, I'm spiritual and you're not. It has nothing to do with that, see? But we can't eat unclean food, though. That does apply somehow, and I believe the way it applies is prophets, they speak words, whether false or true, and that spiritually is food. That's what we understand. You can't eat unclean food. It's going to corrupt you. You'll be diseased. Picture the physical, just eating a bunch of nasty stuff, and it hurts your body. It's going to hurt your spiritual body to eat unclean food. Don't touch dead things. Don't mess with the unbelievers, dead things, Don't go around touching these things spiritually. It has to have that proper meaning, because there's no benefit, touching a dead carcass, okay? How does that spiritually defile me? It doesn't literally do that. It can't do that. So there's a higher meaning to that. It has to be a higher meaning to every single word. Don't mess with dead things. Let the dead bury the dead. That's why he said that. I want to follow you. I want to follow you. But first I need to bury my father, He said, let the dead bury the dead. Let dead things, spiritually, these are the dead things, okay, not to touch, bury the physically dead things. And if you do start touching dead things a lot, you're going to start becoming what you touch. It's on you. You have to wash it off. It's on your body, so it's on your spiritual body. If you go around touching these things all the time, you're going to be drawn in. Start, not that one thing is like such a huge sin. You don't get stoned to death for it, okay? But it's going to lead you into deeper sins. That's how it works. You start touching dead things too much and not washing it off and being clean, repenting, washing, baptized continually, repenting, getting washed. You're going to be sucked in to a deeper thing. And once you get to the deeper thing, then a deeper thing. And once you do some of these deeper things, then you start getting stoned. It's not a joke. You start getting stoned. And there's some people out there that are telling people not just to touch small things, little sins. There are little sins and there are bigger sins. It's true. It's what the word teaches. They go out and tell you straight up to go for the full stoning. They're telling you to go fulfill it and complete it and get stoned, let alone saying be careful about the little things, because then you'll get sucked into the bit. He who is faithful with a little will be given, will be faithful in much, will be given more. You can't be unfaithful about the little things, not that you get stoned for them, but, if you're not faithful with the little things, you're automatically going to be someone that's not faithful with the big things. How is that possible? If you don't care about the little things, then certainly you don't care about the big things. That's where it's going to lead. That's the teaching. But they can't receive correction. These people that are hardened, they don't like it. They hate it. They get angry. A wise man receives correction. That's what the body is for. And it's like there's nobody around. I don't know anyone here in the flesh around me, that can speak like this. Add to whatever I have. Add to it. Give me food that God has given him, and I could add to, and back and forth. Iron sharpens iron. There's nobody around in the flesh I know of here. that I could speak like that. I have to speak to a full-on carnal Christian believer in a way that it's like they can't hear any of my words. They don't hear anything. Like, you can't be doing this. This is sin. They don't see it as sin. They don't know. They don't see it. Commands are simple, but you'll end up doing and being faithful on all these little things, and then also the big things. That's how it'll be in the life of a true believer. I'm convinced of it. So there's we can actually experience his word as being true. That's a part of it too, I think, just to see how true he is, always true. When we read about all those scriptures that say he was hardened and God hardened him to do something to complete his purpose, you know, he's in total sovereignty. We can see the enemies that hate us. He hardens them, like almost for our sake, so we could see his truth, his power. He'll do that. He'll get rid of your enemies, and this is how he does it. He'll make clear the path. He's going to blind them even further so they say something even dumber and even do things that are even deeper into sin, even stupider, dumber. Stupider, yeah. I've seen that. I've experienced it. They start attacking you. God really makes them like they go on a special level of blinding and dumb for that moment, you know. And this is how he clears the path for your enemies. They don't get away with them attacking you and murdering you and stuff. They don't get away with it. They go deeper into this death and blinding. They do. They do. I experienced that at work. You know, started getting attacked. And I experienced some serious blinding on their part. They did some really stupid things that they could not see that they were doing. They couldn't see them. And what it really is, they started acting like little children. That's kind of what it is. Like a carnal person is like a little child. You know, a spiritual person is mature. They know things, they understand things. They're not like little babies, you know, and they start acting like little babies. That's how sinners act. They're like rebellious. They're likened to rebellious little children, of which we also were. And that's why we're supposed to have proper fear, because we also were like that. If it wasn't for him, we would be the same way. There's no room for showing off or boasting or being proud. There's no room for proud through his truth, through his laws. There's no room for it. Through understanding how he does the works in us, there will be no boasting on that day. Only those who did his works and are rewarded. That's how he's found just and perfect in his judgments and rewards. And those who were not, and then they receive the perfect judgments. But no one's going to be able to boast. They don't even have this basic understanding. The whole entire heart, I don't think there's anyone in the harlot that truly believes the sovereignty of God. I don't think there's even one. Because if they did have this proper teaching, that should lead to some kind of other proper teaching and fear. But they don't have any fear, so they don't have this understanding of him being sovereign. They can only say right words sometimes. They can only say it. Do what they say, not what they do, Christ said of the Pharisees, fakes, the frauds, religious people. And that understanding is, you know, basically what he's saying is they're hypocrites. What they say, they themselves don't do. So in that meaning, and with that understanding, do what they say, don't do what they do. You know, don't be a hypocrite. And people don't see it though. They think you're evil for separating from them, you know, more and more. What's going on with him? What are you doing? What are you doing? They always want to know what you're doing. You're seeking the kingdom first. Something you don't understand. I can't even really speak to you about it. What's there to say? You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't hear my words. And they have that, the carnal mind has that curiosity, you know. What are they doing? What is he doing constantly? Like Messiah's parents. What are you doing? You were lost. We couldn't find you. You scared us. What are you doing? We don't understand. Well, I must be going about doing the Father's business. What does it say? It says they did not understand this saying. So much for him coming from the seed, physical seed, flesh profits nothing, of God. You would have thought they would at least understand that, look, Mary and Joseph both knew he's the physical seed of God, and that has something to do with doing the Father's business. But they had zero understanding what he was talking about. Like, what Father's business? Even the people who were just keeping everything according to the shadows and laws, they were still like carnal, you see. It's not that they were evil. It's not that they weren't saints according to God's standard back then. Stony hearts, not hearts of flesh. But the true spiritual man, like, it was on another level. They couldn't see it. What do you mean the Father's business? My understanding of Father's business is going to a physical temple and, not physically touching things and physically not doing any. You told any of those saints back then that what this true Sabbath day means, rest, they would not understand. See? They would think you're telling them to sin. That's why it's a better covenant. See, they thought all these things were important, and they were important because of what it represented spiritually. That's why all of his laws and everything are important still, but not in the sense according to the flesh, natural. That doesn't have any spiritual value. So even the saints that will be in the kingdom, compared to Christ and onward, spiritual, those who become spiritual, like Paul speaks of so much, they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't get it. They think you're breaking all these things. And some of these Hebrew Israelites out there, they start going back to these natural shadow things and commanding it and starting to place heavy burdens on it. This is how you're right. That's not the true teaching. So something's wrong with Christianity. That's true. They acknowledge that. So they find out it's his laws. They don't keep his laws. So they go back into the shadows, into darkness. And they start enforcing and they start dressing like Hebrews, and like start commanding all these physical things and placing it on them, not understanding the true meaning in their heart. Their hearts are not converted. They're just doing physical things, and this is how you're righteous. That's falling from grace. They don't understand that, though. I've looked into these people, too. Many of them think that they're so stuck up and prideful. Trust me on that. They think just because they're colored people that this is a true Hebrew. All white people are devils. Man, they're blind. They don't understand, And some of them acknowledge Paul's writings, and some say he's Antichrist. The ones that acknowledge it, I don't know how they do it because they don't understand any of his words, but they somehow acknowledge it and twist the scriptures of what he says, which is exactly what we read that people would do. Many would, or some, that claim to believe would do these things with Paul's writings because they were spiritual words. Some, spiritual man. They would twist them to their own destruction spiritually, as they do the rest of the scriptures. It's a powerful verse. It's what people do with Paul's writings. Hebrews do it in a different way than the Judases do it, that look like disciples, a little differently than Christianity does it, but they're all twisting his words. They really think it's about blood and race. They're going back into the shadow. That's a heresy. What a Jew was and a Gentile was back then. They're going back into that natural thing, not understanding what the spiritual meaning of Gentile is, spiritual meaning of what a spiritual Jew is. They go back into, I'm colored, so white peoples are dogs. They're dogs to us, We're going back to the scriptures, going back to the true way. It's just unbelievable how God blinds all these people in different ways, and his word just ends up being true over and over again. It's unbelievable. So he drags you into such a depth that you can't even rely on anyone anymore. You know, I used to do that a little more, read more from people and people's videos and stuff. Try to rely on, and then I realized that I can't do that, like at all, not even a little bit, to truly rely on it. You know, he has to give me discernment so I could see this thing. And if there is truth in it, take the little bit of truth and understand that truth, but leave out the rest. And it's no different for someone watching this video. You know, they have to seek the truth and not just rely on some man as if he is that mediator. I am leading you to God, you know, by going through my truth. It's nonsense. And I believe that's what most people are doing with videos and YouTube and stuff. They're seeking their own glory. You know, the true one from the heart will do it because they're obligated to do whatever God is giving them. You know, I'm not saying this is what he gives somebody else specifically, you know. They're doing whatever they ought to do, whatever he's telling you to do. Your own way, a little different than someone else maybe, you know, but you're doing God's works. I do it because if I don't do something, woe is me. And it's too easy. It's too easy. All I have to do is click a button. Woe is me if I do zero, nothing. And my subscriber count's going down. It's gone down 8 in the last 30 days, I think. It's what the YouTube thing said, 7 or 8. And more people that watch these last few videos think it's going to make it go down even more if they end up watching them, you know. Because some of these people are seeking doctrine and knowledge, but then when they start hearing things about sin and law, you know, and keeping spiritual law, that, you know, they run away. They go to somebody like Martin Zender, you know, for example, that sucks people in with God as the savior of all, and then he never really talks about sin. The whole point of this is overcoming sin. If you're not doing that, everything else is vain, prophesying, knowledge. You know, if you're not overcoming sin, all of this other stuff will be of no benefit or value. Knowledge is so you can overcome sin, not the other way around. You can't overcome sin with zero knowledge. That's true. You do have to know and understand these things, or else you'll be led astray. But at the same time, knowledge by itself is worthless if it's not connected to, you know, overcoming sin, if it's not connected to works of love, like Paul speaks of. So Paul's careful not to go around enforcing things on people. Start doing this, you know, putting burden. But at the same time, those that are spiritual, he can see that those are the ones that will be growing and doing these things. So you don't place heavy burdens on people and say, do this, do that, do this, do that. But at the same time, you go to someone that says, oh yeah, I believe in Christ. Are you yet carnal? You know, how many times did he do that? Are you yet carnal? And carnal's no good. Carnal doesn't enter the kingdom. Flesh and blood doesn't enter the kingdom. So if you're yet carnal, you know, it's worthless. It's vain. That's what they can't rightly divide. People like Zender and others, they can't see that. They use liberty and grace to divide it in an evil way and say, here we have liberty, you know, we don't put laws on anyone. That's not the point. They don't see it. They can't see it. It's a strange, deep deception, because some of the things they say are true, more so than in the harlot, but at the same time, they could care less about overcoming. They just don't see any of those verses. It's like they don't exist. They never answer my questions when I ask. Do a video, show me on what it means to establish the law. Paul said that. Paul's letters are for today. No one ever rightly gave me anything that contradicted his word. You know, their version of what that means. They can't even do that. They can't even give it. No one gave me. Such who do all these things and practice them, they will not inherit the kingdom. Don't you know that? They never do anything about these verses. They just skip them. just like the Pharisees did. They just added and took away according to their pleasure, and it pleases them to do these things. You know, many scriptures on this. It's their pleasure to do abomination, you know, heresy. It's their pleasure to do that. They delight they delight in it. And it's true, they delight in it. Yeah, you shall be hated by all men. So how is it that's, you know, your subscriber count's going to go up like 100 per month, keep going up, you know, thousands of people coming in? No, not true. And sure enough, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing the fruit of it. I'm seeing the fruit of his truth. It's going down. It's going down. All right, let's see how low it can go. We'll shoot for 35. We'll shoot for 30. Maybe 20. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I don't really care. It's not my purpose, but it's just an interesting thing how opposite his truth is versus the world's truth. They're increasing in this world, and God's people are decreasing in popularity. In the flesh and even in the online world, they're decreasing.